From NBC News in Washington, this is Meet the Press with Tim Russert.
Welcome again to Meet the Press. Our issues this Sunday morning, an update on the uneasy situations in Iraq and Haiti, the economy, gridlock, midterm elections, and the state of the Clinton presidency. Our guest, the top advisor to the man who is president, the White House Chief of Staff, Leon Panetta. Then we'll hear from a Republican who thinks he should be president. To that end, organizing and traveling throughout the country this past year, the former governor of Tennessee, Lamar Alexander. And in our political roundtable, we'll be joined by author and New York Times columnist William Safire. And joining me in the questioning this morning, David Broder of the Washington Post and Ron Brownstein of the Los Angeles Times. Before we begin our interviews, let us go live to Kuwait City, where NBC's Richard Roth is on duty. Richard, do the Kuwaitis expect Saddam Hussein to invade them once again?
Depends on who you ask. Earlier today, we went up to the border zone. There's a restricted military zone south of the border, about an hour north of the capital here. And as we were going in, we met 3 American military officers coming out. They had been talking to their Kuwaiti counterparts, Kuwaiti officers, who were among the 15,000 or so troops that are deployed in that zone. And one of the officers told to me, this is a direct quote, he said, "The Kuwaitis are convinced he's coming over." There's no hard evidence to support that speculation, nothing to back it up. In fact, UN patrols in the north have said that they've noticed no stepped-up Iraqi military activity, only some civilian activity, some of what Iraq calls stateless Arabs who have set up tents on the Iraqi side of the border. Here in the capital, if you ask people, many of them will tell you they do not believe that there's going to be an invasion. One of the reasons one man said to me is that he, meaning Saddam Hussein, doesn't have the strength anymore. The other reason some people are expressing is that they feel confident of the military and political support they're getting from the West.
Richard Roth, we thank you for the report, and we'll be talking to you throughout the week as the situation develops. Now let's go live to the Pentagon, where our man NBC's Ed Rabel is on duty. Ed, are you there?
I'm here.
Ed, does the United States expect an invasion?
Tim, the top intelligence officer here at the Pentagon, said that the Iraqis would prepare for just such an invasion.
Ed, do we have forces on the ground in Kuwait that could repel an attack by Saddam at this hour, or would we have to rely on Tomahawk missiles into Iraq as the principal deterrent?
The principal deterrent would be Tomahawk missiles. They've already indicated that. We have a destroyer and we also have 2 submarines which can fire Tomahawk missiles. They can fire hundreds of missiles. They would hit Baghdad. There's no question about that. But right now, if you tried to stop an invasion by the Iraqis, they could only blunt it. They couldn't stop it right now.
Ed Rabel, thanks for that report. Now let's go live to Iraq, where I believe Tom Aspel of NBC News is on the telephone. Tom, good morning. Can you hear me?
Tim, yes, good morning. Well, there's certainly no signs in Baghdad that Iraq and the U.S. are about to face each other on the battlefield again, but the official press this morning came out with some editorials saying that Iraq would not be scared into submission. So obviously the Iraqis are telling their people that there is a crisis approaching, but warning them not to be scared.
Tom, how formidable is Saddam's army? We had been led to believe that after the '91 war, he had been nearly crippled, and yet we're seeing a rather considerable show of force on the Kuwaiti border.
Well, I think, Tim, it was well known at the time that the elite Republican Guard divisions escaped most of the punishment inflicted on the Iraqi forces by the Allies during the Gulf War. So what we're seeing here is some divisions of Iraqi Republican Guard, the best troops that Saddam Hussein has, that are being pushed down to the south there, along with their support equipment. And from intelligence indications after the Gulf War, we were led to believe that most of these troops had been unharmed. So, in fact, they're intact, even if their equipment is probably a little old by now, Tim.
Tom, has Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi government heard the warnings from President Clinton that if they go into Kuwait, Baghdad will be hit?
Well, I think the Iraqis are aware of it, but as far as the Iraqi people are being told, the rhetoric coming out of Baghdad is really harking back to those days in 1990 before the Kuwait invasion, but with specific emphasis this time on the damage that the embargo is doing to the Iraqi people and the Iraqi economy. And the Iraqis are going to great pains to point out to people that if there's no decision on Monday in Iraq's favor, then, as one editorial said it this morning, that will definitely take Iraq to the doors leading into the barns of the world. And they mean that, by that they mean Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. So I think they're facing up to some kind of confrontation, but presumably just to draw attention to the crippling effect of the sanctions, Tim.
Tom Aspel, we thank you for that report. Good luck to you, and be careful. We'll be talking to you throughout the week on NBC News. Now let's go live to Salinas, California, where we're joined by White House Chief of Staff Leon Panetta. Mr. Panetta, you just heard our reports from Kuwait, the Pentagon, and Iraq. Can you bring us up to date on the situation in Iraq?
Tim, it continues to be a serious situation that we're watching very closely. They have got just about a division now on the border. They're moving up other troops. It is the Republican Guard. We, in turn, are sending additional aircraft today. As you know, we're not sure why he's doing it. It could be an invasion. It could be just bluster. It could be a threat. But frankly, we can't take anything for granted here. So that's why we are moving a major force into place. We've got a carrier moving there, as well as Tomahawk-equipped vessels. We are deploying, as I said, additional aircraft today. We have U.S. aircraft on alert. We have an additional Aegis cruiser, along with cruise missiles, moving into that area. And as you know, we've got a 4,000-man mechanized battalion that is on its move to there, as well as 2,000 Marines that are deployed off of Kuwait. So we are, in fact, working very closely, not only with our military, but with our allies, to be able to blunt any invasion if, in fact, that happens.
You heard Richard Roth report from Kuwait that we do not have the assets on the ground in Kuwait to repel an actual invasion, and that our principal deterrent, according to Ed Rabel at the Pentagon, would be to throw Tomahawk missiles into Baghdad. Is there any doubt in Saddam's mind or in the American people's minds that if the Iraqis step over the line into Kuwait, the United States will launch missiles into Baghdad?
The President, I think, has sent a very clear message to Saddam Hussein that we are not going to allow the mistakes of the past to be repeated, and that we will take action. I don't think he ought to underestimate the resolve or the will of the United States to take action if, in fact, he crosses that border.
This morning there was an interview with a soldier at Fort Stewart who was packing up, ready to leave for Kuwait, and he said, quote, "If we had taken care of him the first time, we wouldn't have to be going back." Will be part of the U.S. strategy at this point, if Saddam does invade Kuwait, for us to carry out the mission into Baghdad and eliminate Saddam Hussein once and for all?
Well, I'm not going to go into the details of what a military mission might be if we have to face that fact, but I can tell you this, we're not going to repeat the mistakes of the past either.
How formidable is Saddam's fighting force?
Well, Tim, I don't think it's obviously as formidable as it was at the time of the Persian Gulf War. But nevertheless, this remains a threat. The Republican Guard is one of their elite forces. They've got the manpower. They still have some of their equipment. They actually have equipment that they took from the Kuwaitis in the first invasion. So we can't underestimate their ability to be able to move quickly into Kuwait, and for that reason, that's why we're deploying these forces.
Mr. Panetta, how's the Pentagon, National Security Council betting? Will there be an invasion?
It's very hard to say right now, Tim. Obviously, there's a lot of guesswork going on when you're dealing with Saddam Hussein. No one is quite sure what he has in mind here when he moves these forces. But if we take the lessons from 4 years ago, when he deployed this kind of force towards the border, he then did invade. And I think we have to assume the worst here so that we're prepared to respond. He's very unpredictable right now. He obviously is concerned about these sanctions, but as the President has said, and I repeat today, if he wants these sanctions removed, he has to meet the conditions provided by the United Nations.
If Saddam does invade and we respond militarily, will the President call Congress back and seek a resolution authorizing more military action in the Persian Gulf?
Well, certainly we will be in very close consultation with the Congress and with the leadership. And I think on this situation, hopefully we will all speak with one voice with regards to responding to that kind of threat. And obviously, we would want to work very closely with the Congress and our allies to establish the kind of unity we had in the Persian Gulf War.
Let's turn quickly to Haiti. General Cedras, there are rumors that he will step down tomorrow. What can you tell us about that?
I can't confirm that at this point, Tim, but clearly we have this mission on track right now. As you know, the men and women of our armed forces, I think, have done an outstanding job there. It is a stable situation. There's calm that's been restored to the country. President Aristide is prepared to return. We have the parliament in place. I think in a matter of days, we will see democracy restored to Haiti, and that was the fundamental goal of the president's policy with regards to that area.
In light of the limited amnesty that was passed, which will pardon General Cedras for his political crimes, but hold him accountable for crimes such as rape and torture and so forth, alleged, would you expect General Cedras to leave the country rather than confront the prospect of limited amnesty?
Well, that was always our preferred recommendation with regards to General Cedras. Obviously, that remains for him and the Haitians to ultimately decide. The most important thing is that he steps down from power, and that will happen on October 15th, as we expect. That was the deadline set. We want it to be done with reconciliation between the parties. We want it to be done in a way that establishes a stable atmosphere for democracy to take hold there, and we think that can happen.
There are reports on the ground in Haiti, Mr. Panetta, that the United States is working very hard to ensure that the prime minister that President Aristide would appoint to help run his government would be pro-American as well as pro-Aristide, and that the U.S. is also working feverishly to guarantee that the members of the parliament be pro-American as well as pro-Aristide. What's your reaction?
Well, anytime a democracy takes hold in another country, that democracy has to work its way through on its own. We would like, obviously, for the situation to be one that's balanced. We would like it to be one that assures reconciliation between the parties there. We would like it to be one that ensures that, in fact, Haiti can become a strong democracy in the Caribbean. So obviously, we would want to see a balanced government there, but in the end, the decision is President Aristide's, it's the parliament's. That's what democracy is all about, and we can't dictate what course they ultimately take, but it has to be one, we hope, that would be balanced.
But we would prefer a prime minister and a parliament that is pro-American as well as pro-Aristide.
But obviously, we would prefer to have strong relations with Haiti, and whatever it takes to implement strong relations, I can assure you that's something we're going to work together on.
Mr. Panetta, if you can wait right there, we're going to take a quick break and be right back and talk about some domestic concerns, including the midterm elections. We'll be right back.
A drug raid goes wrong.
So they were tipped off.
A leak from the inside.
I think you're looking for a rotten apple.
A cop on the take.
Say borrows money.
Has Maggie's boyfriend crossed the line?
If he's gone wrong, sooner or later, we'll get him.
Blue Healers, 7:30 Tuesday on 7.
Now, what do you think people notice most about your appearance? Your hairdo? New clothes? Think again. It's your smile that makes the difference. Now, if you're too embarrassed to smile, Demtel would like you to watch this.
I'm Morgan Fairchild, and I know how important it is to have a beautiful smile. We all know that coffee, smoking, and aging yellow our teeth. But now it's simple to have beautiful white teeth.
Next, I'd like you to listen to Dr. George Madray. He's an American dentist who not only invented this non-abrasive tooth whitening process, but uses it to whiten his patients' teeth and his own.
My foam has been tested and proven as a safe and effective whitening agent. Now I've made it available for you at home.
Jeanette used dental white on her upper teeth only. And just look at these dramatic results.
My boyfriend, he loves my new smile.
I was amazed at how simple and easy it was to use.
My teeth were whiter after the first time I used it.
This is not a complicated or messy three-step process, or one of those ineffective brush-ons.
Simply apply the dental white formula to the custom tray and fit it to the contours of your teeth. Even if you're a regular coffee drinker, even if your teeth have turned yellow with age, Dental White will make your teeth more brilliant than they've ever been before.
And there's no risk. Try Dental White.
When you buy Dental White from Demtel, you get everything you need for a complete 3-week treatment. 2 custom trays, a large bottle of Dental White, and complete, easy-to-follow instructions, all for just $49.95, and Demtel's $3.95 guaranteed total delivery charge. You don't have to be rich and famous or lucky to have beautiful white teeth. All you need is Dental White.
Dental White is easy.
What an offer. Ring now, but do not send any money. We'll bill you. Ring 1311.99. Ring now for Demtel's $3.95 total delivery charge. Yes, $3.95 on any quantity. Ring now, even if you don't have a credit card. Ring 1311.99. Ring now.
We're talking with White House Chief of Staff Leon Panetta, and David Broder of the Washington Post has the next question.
Let's talk politics for a minute, Mr. Panetta. Having had the privilege of hearing you twice on Friday, I know that you think that you can now set up this midterm election as a choice between the old policies of Ronald Reagan and the new policies of Bill Clinton because you think this contract that the Republican members of Congress signed commits them to those old Reagan policies. What I don't understand is what was so bad about those policies.
Well, I think all you have to do is to ask the American people. I think 2 years ago when they voted Bill Clinton into office, they basically rejected those policies. They said that what we saw were a lot of promises about the ability to balance the budget. At the same time, we saw almost a $4 trillion debt added to our future. We saw a situation in which people talked about jobs in the economy, and jobs were going down, not up, during that period. We had somebody who talked about being the education president, but was cutting resources for education. We saw a period of time when the wealthy became wealthier in this country, when our tax system became more unfair. Those were all the results of the 80s. We were almost in a situation where basically those policies put us in bankruptcy. The American people rejected that, and this president basically acted when he came into office to try to restore a lot of the damage that was done during the 80s. And I think that's what people want in this country. They want us to move forward, not back to those same policies.
Everything that I hear as I go around covering the campaigns is that the American people now think the country's headed in the wrong direction, that they distrust Washington much more than they did in the past. If you went out on the streets of Salinas, California this morning and said, were we better off with Ronald Reagan or are we better off now with Bill Clinton? What do you think the answer would be?
If you just match personalities, there's no question they probably would say, well, you know, Ronald Reagan probably wasn't so bad. But David, you know very well, and it's probably a very sad commentary, that if you want to be popular in office and if you want to survive in office, the best way to do that is to complain about the problems, to blame somebody else about the problems, and to always vote no. That's a sure winner in terms of being able to stay in office and be popular. But that's not what this president decided to do. He decided to take on the problems that face this country. That involves some political risk. But you have to then ask the American people, do you want us to solve the problems that you're facing with all of the risks associated with that, or do you simply want us to tell you what you'd like to hear and do nothing? I think that's the choice that they're really facing.
Mr. Panetta, the prospect, as you know, is that there'll be more Republicans and a more conservative Congress next year. The President said on Friday that he looks forward to working with Congress in a bipartisan way. Now, does that mean that he is prepared to really scale back on the ambitiousness of his health care plan, to put forward a tougher welfare plan, or is this just rhetoric on his part?
As always, I think the President, David, would like to work with the Congress on a bipartisan basis. That's the best formula if you're trying to put legislation together and get it through the Congress. There's no question that we will reach out to both parties in the effort to pass health care reform, in the effort to pass welfare reform, in the effort, hopefully, to keep the deficit track in place that we established in this session of the Congress. But to do that, it's a two-way street. It's not just a one-way street. It means that the President has to reach out. Obviously, we will, as we did this time with regards to, you know, the economic plan. We reached out to the Republicans and said, would you want to work with us on an economic plan? They said, absolutely not. This is one you're going to have to do on your own. When we talked about health care reform, we reached out to them. They said, yes, we'd like to work with you, and then they backed away from it. So if you're going to have truly a bipartisan relationship in a Congress, it's a two-way street. Both have to work in good faith to try to solve the problems that face this country.
Mr.
If the next Congress does that, we'll get it done.
Mr. Panetta, would you recommend to the President that he now bring Republicans into his administration as he promised in the campaign?
I think we ought to have a good relationship with Republicans, both on the Hill, and we ought to have Republicans represented within the administration. There are some Republicans that are in some of the positions now, but I think it makes good sense for the country to have a good partnership that represents the leadership in this country. People are not interested, and I think this is another message 2 years ago, they're not interested in partisanship. They are really not interested in gridlock, whatever the Republicans say. I think they want the government to work for them.
Mr. Panetta, let me ask you, going back to one thing that David suggested there, in framing this as a choice between Ronald Reagan's policies, going back to Ronald Reagan's, and Bill Clinton's policies, are you saying to voters in California, where you are, in Michigan, in Florida, in Texas, that they should vote for Democrats if they're satisfied with Bill Clinton and the direction he's taking the country, and they should vote for Republicans if they're not?
What we're saying is what is involved in every election. The American people have to decide the direction of this country and where we ought to go. We think we've got a strong record showing that we're trying to move this nation forward. We've cut the deficit in half. We put a strong economic plan in place. We're trying to put our economic house in order. Joblessness in this country is at its lowest level in 4 years. We're producing more jobs in the economy. We've put an education reform piece into place. We've enacted strong trade policies. We haven't solved all the problems, but we're moving forward. What are the Republicans saying they're going to do? They're basically pledging the same kind of policies we saw in the 80s that bankrupted the country. Now, people have got a very clear choice, but ultimately it's their choice to make, whether they want to go forward or whether we want to move backward.
Now in criticizing that Republican contract, Democrats like yourself, the president, basically every Democrat, has been saying, warning that it would lead to cuts in Medicare and Social Security and other entitlements. Let me ask you, by raising that alarm now, by ringing those bells, are you undermining the capacity of the administration to come back later this year after the Kerry Danforth Commission finishes its work and propose entitlement savings of your own?
Not at all, Ron. I think the one thing we're criticizing is that the Republicans will not tell you where they're going to pick up $1 trillion in costs in their plan. They say they want to balance the budget. That's $1 trillion. On top of that, they add a group of tax cuts that'll cost you another $300 to $400 billion. Then they say they're going to increase defense spending another $61 billion. When you ask them, how are you going to pay for it, they don't give you the answer. Now, we have had to do that in our budgets. When the president presented our budget, we had a $500 billion reduction plan. We had $250 billion in spending cuts. We had $250 billion in revenue increases on the upper income brackets. We basically had to define for the country and spell out very clearly where we were going to go. We intend to do that in this next budget. We're going to work with the Kerry Commission to try to establish additional entitlement reforms. We've got to lay it out. We've got to present it to the country. All we're saying to the Republicans is, you lay it out as well. Be honest with the American people. What programs are you going to cut in order to essentially deal with this $1 trillion debt?
Mr. Panetta, where you're sitting in California, they have an initiative on the ballot that would cut off all services for illegal immigrants, including services the Supreme Court says have to be provided. Education would require teachers to notify law enforcement officials if they believe children in their classes are there illegally. The president is going back to California in 2 weeks. Will he take a position on Proposition 187?
Well, Janet Reno, our Attorney General, Ron, as you know, has expressed some concerns about that initiative. I think the president has said this: we have a responsibility at the federal government to try to deal with this problem. It is a legitimate problem. And the way we're dealing with it is through stronger enforcement at the border. We initiated Operation Gatekeeper at the border, which is a very good program that now is resulting in almost 800 arrests a day. That's the way you deal with the illegal immigration problem. I think the danger I see in the politics of this is that it's the politics of fear and hate and blame. And what you need to do is to say, look, this is a problem. Let's deal with it in the right way. Let's not blame people. Let's not create a situation in which we hate those that are trying to come to this country. Let's try to deal with the basic problem itself. That's where the president's coming from.
So he will oppose it then?
I don't know whether the president's going to take a position on state initiatives. Once you start doing that, you've got a lot of initiatives to take positions on. But what he's going to say is, I'm for strong enforcement to try to prevent illegal immigration from taking place.
Mr. Panetta, finally, Ross Perot last week said that American voters should send Republicans to Congress and the House and Senate, let them take the majority. Is Ross Perot still an important voice in American politics that should be listened to?
You know, I think what needs to be listened to, Tim, is not so much Ross Perot, but we need to listen to the people who supported Ross Perot a few years ago. What did they ask for? They asked for strong deficit reduction. No Republican voted for the deficit reduction plan that we put in place. 2, they asked for political reform, campaign reform, lobbying reform. What were the forces in the Congress that defeated that? It was the Republicans in the Senate who defeated that. So I would say to the Perot voters, look at the issues and look at where the members of Congress stood on those issues, and then cast your vote. Don't just do it blanket, following the direction of Ross Perot, who I think has abandoned the very principles that he stood for a few years ago.
Mr. Panetta, we thank you for joining us, and have a safe trip home to Washington.
Thanks, Tim.
And coming next, a Republican response from the former governor of Tennessee who wants to be president, Lamar Alexander.
Only one lighting shop in Adelaide has the range, the quality and the prices, and that's Delights. Like quality South Australian modern pendants, 3-light pendants from a low $49.95, Tiffany pendants and county pendants at just $59.95. Install them yourself, Federation lights, $19.95. Decorative lamp, base and shade, $89. And cast exterior wall bracket and under eave lights, $29.95. If you want the lights, you'll find them at D-Lights, Ashford, Holden Hill and Morford Vale.
Are you alone? Pick up the phone and call Instant Date. There are no membership fees and no delays. Call Instant Date now on 0055 10131 and find your ideal partner. Instant Dating on 0055 10131.
More of Meet the Press after this brief news update.
Good morning. Iraq now appears to have more than 60,000 troops on its border with Kuwait. American and Kuwaiti forces are moving into position, preparing for a conflict. President Clinton has warned Saddam Hussein that force will be met with force. The Pentagon has placed more Patriot missile batteries in Saudi Arabia. The Pentagon says that all appears quiet for now. Thousands of Gulf War veterans have reported debilitating illnesses called Persian Gulf Syndrome. They've complained, saying the government has turned a deaf ear. But now Congress has approved legislation to compensate victims, but did not set a dollar amount. Defense Secretary William Perry is sending a warning to Iraq. Any attack on Kuwait will be matched with American might. Perry made his comments yesterday in Haiti, where he met with General Raul Cedras. Reports say Cedras will surrender power tomorrow. Control of the military will go to the second in command, moving Haiti one step closer to the restoration of democracy. It's believed Serbian snipers are to blame for a deadly attack on the streets of Sarajevo. One man was killed yesterday. 11 people were wounded, including a child. Since the gunfire erupted near United Nations troops, the peacekeepers are being blamed for doing nothing. Meanwhile, UN relief flights resumed today. 2 planes were fired upon Friday at Sarajevo's airport. The Central Intelligence Agency pumped millions of dollars into Japan in the 1950s and 60s. The New York Times reports the money was given to the country's Liberal Democratic Party. Former CIA officials are quoted as saying the agency wanted to stabilize the Japanese government by keeping the left in check. And finally, Elvis Presley kept us singing for decades, and fellow performers gathered near his Memphis home Saturday to pay tribute. Stars ranging from Billy Ray Cyrus and Jerry Lee Lewis to Tony Bennett appeared. Their concert and pay-per-view special was held to benefit the St. Jude's Children's Hospital. That's the news on this Sunday morning. Now back to Tim Russert in Washington.
Meet the Press will be back after this station break.
8:30 Tuesday, a day that would tear apart so many families.
I held on to Christine. She went down.
We're not the ones to blame.
Who gave the order?
What happened wasn't an accident.
You killed my girl! He killed her!
A powerful episode of Between the Lines. Then on the Heat.
Always that way.
Luann sings the blues.
An accomplice.
And uncovers a hotbed of crime.
That gun is going to cost you. Should have got rid of it after you killed Cook.
In the Heat of the Night, 9:30 Tuesday on 7.
When you just need a little help to put on a happy face, sew a seam, solve the crossword, pick a lucky number, check the price tag, knit 1, purl 2, pick a bargain, catch the bus on time, find your favourite sports show, plan the holiday, note a happy event. Then look to Burke's Chemists for fashion frame reading glasses in a range of 6 magnifications. Only $29.99. Burke's Chemists, Rundle Mall, opposite the fountain.
Buy a ticket in this year's Galaxy Homes Channel 7 Christmas Appeal Lottery.
And this fantastic home and land package could be yours for just $2.
Tickets are available from any of these outlets.
ANZ branches,
BP service stations,
Myer,
Chemmart Chemists,
Wallace Theatres,
Your Friendly Butcher,
Movieland,
Solver Decorating Centres, or fill in the coupon in the Advertiser, Sunday Mail, or with your ETSA account.
All proceeds go to the Children's Research Foundation.
So give the kids hope and get your tickets today.
Welcome back to Meet the Press. We'll mix it up with William Safire in our political roundtable in just a minute. But first, we're joined by the former governor of Tennessee, who'd like to be the Republican nominee for president in 1996. With us, Lamar Alexander. Mr. Alexander, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thank you, Tim.
You just heard White House Chief of Staff Leon Panetta ask for one voice in response to Saddam Hussein and the situation in Iraq. How is President Clinton handling the situation in Iraq thus far?
Well, so far, fine. I think he's made one restatement of what we should do, and I think after this, his actions should speak rather than his words. And I think what Saddam Hussein would find is that the United States will strongly support whatever President Clinton decides he has to do to enforce that line.
In Haiti, it appears that General Cedras will resign and step down. President Aristide is scheduled to return to power next week. Is President Clinton's policy in Haiti working?
Well, we don't know yet. I don't think we should be there. I don't think it's in our vital interest to be there. We now have ourselves in a situation which many of us have been talking about. We need to be able to project our forces around the world in 2 different places at once, and this morning we do, Haiti and then in the Middle East as well. I hope it works now that we're there, and I hope we get out soon.
Earlier this year, you were talking about President Clinton, and you said the following, that he is traveling the road of appeasement abroad and socialism at home. Give me some examples of appeasement abroad and socialism at home.
Well, I think appeasement abroad is the repeated threats without any follow-up. I've never seen a president, particularly a president, who's so constantly acting like a boy in the schoolyard. If you take one more step, I'll do this.
Where?
Well, Haiti to begin with, Bosnia second. Hopefully it doesn't apply to what's going on now in the Middle East. Go on back, I even think, to what happened in Europe. I think not to give Poland a steady route into NATO is a signal to the rest of the world and to the former Soviet Union that we were afraid to make the Russians mad.
Isn't appeasement rather a strong word?
Well, it is a strong word, but if we'd paid more attention to that word when it was used back in the 1940, maybe we wouldn't have had World War II. We went from an administration which showed strength to an administration which zigged and zagged. And we may find everyone in the world testing our resolve. So it's not too strong a word.
You think Saddam Hussein is testing our resolve
Obviously he's testing our resolve. I mean, obviously he's testing our resolve. And my hope is that the president has learned not to allow him to do that, and we won't have a steady stream of you take one more step, I'll come back. I think the president's actions need to speak for him from here on out. In the case of Saddam Hussein, it'll help him all around the world.
And socialism at home?
Well, we have socialism all over the place. We have urban socialism that we need to end. Those are Jack Kemp's words, which I strongly support. We should begin to privatize public housing. We should have a GI Bill for kids to help poor families get out of it. What would you call the national health care proposal if you wouldn't call it the government ownership of the means of production, which I was taught in college is socialism. Now, I don't go around using those words all the time, but I did use them then, and I would stick with them.
Do you support the Republican contract, which would cut taxes, increase defense, and still balance the budget?
Well, I think the Republican contract, I would give an A+ for form. I'm busy formulating my own agenda for the country's future, and I'd start with it. I think it has some good things in it.
You know, it's interesting. I was reading your record as governor and contrasting it now to candidate for president. When you were governor of Tennessee, you had the biggest tax increase in history to pay for education.
That's right.
You doubled the gasoline tax.
Right.
And as vice chairman of the National Governors Conference, you voted for a resolution which said the way to deal with our national budget situation is freeze all spending, including cost of living increases for Social Security, cut defense, and hold out the possibility of increasing taxes.
Well, let me go right back to your point. When I was the governor of Tennessee, I was a very activist governor. We were at the bottom of the heap economically, and for the last 10 years, family incomes have been growing faster than in any other state. When I was finished after 8 years, we had less debt, 8 balanced budgets, the second lowest tax rate in the country. So that, I think, was a very good record. If I could be president and apply half that success to this country, we'd be in very good shape.
But you did raise taxes to meet your goals.
Of course I did, but I balanced the budget for 8 years, I reduced the state's debt, I reduced the number of state employees, and we ended up with the second lowest tax rate among all states. Today, it's the lowest.
What about your prescription to deal with the federal deficit when you were vice chairman of the National Governors Conference? It freeze all spending, including cost of living increases for Social Security, cut defense, and hold out the possibility of increased federal taxes. Would you still adopt that prescription? Or because you're running for president, you have to move to the right?
One of the things, Tim, I tried to do as chairman of the governors was to keep us to stop from acting like senators and pay more attention to our state responsibilities. So I'm going to go back and check just what I did on that case. My prescription would be no more entitlements, as in the health care bill, where there would have been 5. I would take elementary and secondary education, welfare, and job training and send those back to the states. That's one way to control the growth. And the family tax credit that the Republicans proposed in the contract is a good idea. By limiting entitlement growth aside from Social Security to 2 to 3% a year, you can save $500 to $600 billion over 5 years. Apply 2 of those dollars to deficit reduction, 1 of those dollars to a family tax credit. That's a pretty good strategy, and it's a good way to start in terms of holding spending down. David?
Governor, you unannounced campaign for the president, the slogan, cut their pay and send them home, talking about the Congress. Right. You say it gets standing ovations everywhere you go.
Most places.
It doesn't get a standing ovation from Newt Gingrich and Bob Dole.
No.
They say that if you make it a part-time Congress and a full-time president, all you've done is shift power to the president.
Well, I don't think that's true at all. You're right about the standing ovations outside Washington. Here I get a lot of frowns, and there I get a lot of applause. The idea, of course, is a citizen Congress, where they'd be here 6 months a year. You'd cut their pay in half. You'd let them take a real job back in their hometown and work alongside the rest of us. If you've been in Washington for the last 20 years, that's going to be hard to accept. But I think if the Congress went home, the president would relax. Pat Moynihan wrote a great article about 20 years ago where he pointed out that when William Howard Taft went on a foreign affairs trip, Congress took its first junket. When we built the West Wing at the White House, Congress built its first office building. When we created the budget office at the White House, we got the Congressional Budget Office. If the Congress would quit thinking that its job is, that what we wanted to do is pass 1,000-page education bills, 1,400-page health care bills, get into our life in every way, and we go home. That's what we'd like for them to do. I think the president would relax.
You really are talking about building a much smaller, or really creating a much smaller federal government,
yes,
then, not just a part-time Congress.
The 11 states with the lowest taxes have a 90-day limit on their state legislature. What we need in this country more than anything else is to limit the government in Washington and get the responsibility back home. I was here this week. I didn't know that there was this 1,000-page education bill going through in the way that it did. It just slipped on through. I'm sure the president will take great credit for it. It's a perfect example of what's wrong with Washington, D.C. I mean, it has a new national school board. It puts the focus on all of the things that the governors for the last 10 years have tried to get it off of. It's just one more example of this Washington taking over something that ought to be a local activity.
At your press conference on that bill, you said that you objected to the provision that Senator Feinstein put in that would require the schools to suspend any student who brought a weapon to school. What in the world is wrong with that?
What is wrong with that is why should Senator Feinstein set the weapons policy for every school in 15,000 school districts? Why should Senator Helms set the gay rights policy for every school district in every school district? Why should a national school board tell what to teach? Why should there be a new secretary for gender equity, for heaven's sakes? We don't need the Congress advice.
How far do you carry this? Would you object to a federal crime bill that sets standards for the states?
I do object to that. If I had been governor and the federal crime bill had passed with the provisions from Washington that set the local sentencing standards, I hope I would have had the strength to refuse to take the money. If I were governor, I would not take the money under the education bill that passed last
Well, you
week.
heard Mr. Panetta say that the country doesn't want to go back to the policies of Ronald Reagan. Sounds to me like you're going back to a kind of government that we haven't seen in this country since the 1920s.
I'm back since maybe before that. What we need to do is take the government out of Washington, D.C., back to the communities. This is the information age, and the biggest difference between the direction Bill Clinton is taking the country and the direction we should take it is he wants to reinvent everything here. We should begin to dismantle the government here and take it back to communities and back to individuals.
Governor, that is a very ambitious agenda, major changes in federal policy. Yeah. Do you think that if, as President Alexander, you were trying to pass that agenda, you could pass it given the kind of situation we've seen here in Washington in the last few months, where we have what in effect seems to be the Dole rule, where any controversial idea has to get in the Senate not 50 votes, but 60 votes to end a filibuster? What do you feel as a former governor, as a potential president, about this repeated use of the filibuster and, in effect, requiring any change, any meaningful change in the country to have 60 votes?
Well, I'm not ready to change the Senate rule, and I think Senator Dole, Senator Graham, and others did the right thing in opposing so much that President Clinton proposed. I suppose what Republicans, and I include all of us in this, could have done better in the last 2 years is be bolder at what we're for. For example, if instead of arguing with the Democrats about how to reinvent welfare here, we should have taken Nancy Kassebaum's proposal and ended welfare here and moved it all the way back to the states. If we'd done that with welfare, education, job training, if we'd offered to cut the pay of Congress and send them home and have a citizen legislature, then our proposals wouldn't have been so timid and we wouldn't have looked like that all we were doing was opposing.
Can you see getting 60 votes for the Kassebaum proposal, if that's what it takes to change the federal welfare system in that way?
Yes, I can, because I think, for welfare reform, I certainly can. I think there are a number of Democrats who would agree that reinventing welfare for the 9th time in Washington, D.C. since '64 at a cost of billions more will never work, that we ought to send it all back home. We ought to argue for Republican government, which is what I think we'll have after 1996, and then we'll have a chance to do these things.
Your citizen legislator proposal would eliminate all the restrictions on outside income for members of Congress. Couldn't that provide a new avenue for special interest to influence legislators? You could have the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee working for Citibank, the chairman of the Senate Environment Committee hired by Dow Chemical, the chairman of the Senate Energy Committee hired by Exxon. Couldn't that engender the kind of cynicism that you're trying to respond to through your proposal?
It's hard to imagine how there could be more cynicism than there is today. I mean, most people think that the lobbyists here have more influence than the voters do. And after seeing that education bill this week, I think they're probably right. You'd run some risk with that. But in the states that have legislatures that are limited by time, they still have their conflict of interest rules. There's still public disclosure of what they're paid and what they make. And I think it's a much better Congress. It'd be more in touch with the people. That's the congressional reform we really need.
Mr. Alexander, excuse me, Mr. Alexander, thank you for, I'm fine, I'll make it. Thank you for joining us, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of you in the months ahead.
Thank you.
And in a moment, New York Times columnist William Safire.
He's lost his memory, but a lethal jigsaw could lose him his life. Tom Berenger, Bob Hoskins, and Greta Scacchi from Presumed Innocent in the heart-pounding suspense Shattered, 8:30 tonight on 7.
It's going to be Australia 2. Stand up, Australia. They're about to cross the line. Australia 2 has done it. They have won the America's Cup. A wonderful day for all Australians.
When Australians bring a committed team together, when they get the support and encouragement they need, they reveal a unique ability for clever thinking, for design perfection, for high-tech solutions that can change the way the world thinks about Australia and the way we think about the world. One Australia is a challenge by all Australians for the America's Cup in May 1995. One Australia, challenging the world.
Don't you know it's magic? Oh, baby, it's magic.
Solomons are Australia's largest carpet retailers, with more carpets, more style, more stores, more experience, and more value for money. That's why for over 100 years we've always said, there's magic in a Solomons carpet.
Magic carpet ride for you and me.
Solomons Carpets. Call in or call us and we'll come to you.
Don't you know it's magic?
McGuigan Brothers, as Australian as you. Brian McGuigan creates wines for Australian tastes and Australian lifestyles. But now, the world is taking notice. At the prestigious LA New World International Wine Fair, they awarded the gold medal to Bin 7000 Chardonnay, and they named Bin 2000 Hermitage as best Shiraz Hermitage in the entire New World. Enjoyed at home, fated abroad. Available now. McGuigan Brothers Wine, the flavor of Australia.
I hope you'll understand those bleeding feet and hands. One broken soul laid bare, a world of guilt to bear. I know you had your reasons, they were all so wrong. The only thing you needed, you had never known. Bleeding hearts, are you bleeding now? Don't hide it all, sing on.
The cool people think that I need God's forgiveness, and the bad people think it's out of reach. But we tour in schools, universities, and prisons, and I'm convinced God is ready to forgive everyone.
We're back with Bill Safire. All right, Safire, how's your man Clinton doing on Iraq?
My man Clinton.
You voted for him.
I voted for him, and I'm now having second thoughts on Iraq. Either Saddam is serious about invading Kuwait, or he is not. If he is serious, it isn't for our man Clinton to say, let's not blow this out of all proportion. It's for him to assert very clearly that we are not in the business of just defending Kuwait. If this attack does take place, it would be a fight to the finish. I think Leon Panetta this morning said something about we won't make the same mistake again. By that, he meant the mistake of not finishing off that Republican Guard. Colin Powell's advice to don't have a turkey shoot was a mistake. So that if the direction is toward an invasion, we must make absolutely clear that this time there'll be a parade in Baghdad. This time the whole Saddam Hussein family and party will have to go. That's if there's an invasion. If not, that's a different story.
Well, let's just play this out a little bit. Politically, a month before the midterm elections, President Clinton encounters Saddam Hussein, stares him down, or finishes him off. Doesn't that shake things up in terms of what might happen a month from now?
Well, to assume that Saddam Hussein is trying to help Bill Clinton in this election is carrying the conspiracy theory a little far. I think what's happening is Plan B. If he is just maneuvering toward Kuwait to dramatize his problem. His problem is very clear. That is, he's had to stop the subsidies because he has no oil sales, and prices have shot up, and he's becoming less popular as a dictator in Iraq. He has to do something, so he's rattling the saber. What he wants is a lifting of those sanctions. He has Russia on his side, because they want the $6 billion that Iraq owes them, and he has France on his side pretty much, because they like to do business with Iraq. So he's sowing some dissension within the Security Council.
How plausible would it be that, one, he is inviting the Western press in? We only can get into Iraq when invited, and now we're being allowed in. But we'll start seeing pictures of children starving and in need of medicine. The crisis will heighten on the border, and Saddam will say, send me Jimmy Carter. Help me resolve this.
I can certainly see that happening. And he's not crazy anymore, I don't think. I think he's crazy like a fox.
And what should the U.S. response be to that?
Should be very clear that, number one, if their threats to resume arms production, unless they get their sanctions lifted, go into effect, then we will take out those areas by air. And in other words, not to start compromising from being intimidated.
So far, the first 48 hours of this mini crisis, how's President Clinton doing?
He's playing it very cautiously, very carefully, and very timorously. I think he should...
Smartly?
I think he should introduce the element of a disproportionate response, which means we're not just going to answer tit for tat. If we are invaded, we are going to take you out.
I think Leon Panetta may have done that this morning. David
I was
Broder?
going to say, I don't understand why you say this is timorous. They've sent the clearest possible message that that Baghdad, the capital, will be hit if they cross the border into Kuwait. What's timorous about that?
You didn't hear that from the president. All you heard from the president, especially in that first press conference, was let's not blow this out of proportion. We don't know what's happening here.
Well, I think, I mean, the irony to me, Tim, in this whole thing is that President Clinton, who has been criticized, I think, with good basis for his management of foreign policy, now is in a situation where he could rescue his party from what looks like a big midterm loss if he goes into a showdown with Saddam Hussein. Ron?
That's right. And not only that, but I think that if Saddam Hussein crosses the border, the presidential hopes of two of the Republicans from the Bush administration, Jim Baker, who has been talking about it, and Richard Cheney, who's been talking about it a lot more seriously, they're both going to have to answer a lot of questions that they perhaps did not anticipate answering in a 1996 context.
Colin Powell, too.
Colin Powell as well.
But as George Bush found out, you can go to 91% in the polls after fighting off Saddam Hussein. It's a very short-lived honeymoon.
True, but I think it's a honeymoon that Bill Clinton would like to have.
Let's take a break right there. We'll be right back after this commercial.
Tuesday on Blue Heelers, a drug raid for no results.
So they were tipped off.
A leak from the inside.
I think you're looking for a rotten apple.
A cop on the take.
Say he borrows money.
Suspicions.
I don't trust this bloke, boss.
Allegations.
We had the informant in custody, and he only spoke to coppers.
Shocks and surprises.
So you want to be handcuffed, detective?
Has Maggie's boyfriend crossed the line?
If he's gone wrong, sooner or later, we'll get him.
Don't miss Australia's most popular drama. Blue Heelers, 7:30 Tuesday night on Channel 7.
Hi, I'm Tim Shaw for Demtel. Has this ever happened to you? Drive you nuts. Do your kids give the carpet a hiding? Trails, tracks, spills, stains? Help, this carpet looks like it's had it. Well, watch this. It's No Wet Wonder Foam, a fantastic carpet cleaner from Demtel. It's amazing. Let's make it a real test.
What about this? Red wine. I'm sure this has happened to you. Coffee. Now that's a real mess.
But Wonder Foam is super concentrated, only a capful to about half a litre of warm water. Now, with your special foam applicator, dip and remove all the water from the rollers. The No Wet Wonder Foam is all you need. You won't believe your eyes. This powerful foam works gently without soaking and absorbs nearly every bit of dirt, leaving your carpets looking like new. The foam turns to crystals, trapping leftover dirt, and your vacuum cleaner does the rest. Carpet cleaning machines can soak the carpet, dragging the dirt to the bottom of the fibres and drenching the underfelt. Spray cans, would you use one? Detergents can dry sticky, attracting new dirt. No wonder this foam is truly amazing. Lets you clean most carpets quickly, totally, and without soaking. This specially designed applicator is lightweight, but it's up to the toughest job. And by the way, it's not just for carpet, because it performs its magic on chairs you thought would never come clean. And No Wet Wonder Foam can be yours from Demtel for a lot less than you'd expect to pay. But there's more, because if Wonder Foam doesn't work as easily and effectively for you as you've just seen on TV, we'll gladly refund your money. But there's still more, because in this offer we'll include not one, but 2 large bottles of Wonder Foam, enough to do the average home many times over, plus the special applicator at no extra charge. It's a great money-saving offer, all for just $39.95.
Ring now, but do not send any money. We'll bill you. Ring 13 11 99. Ring now for Demtel's $3.95 total delivery charge.
Don't you know it's magic? Oh, baby, it's magic.
Solomons are Australia's largest carpet retailers, with more carpets, more style, more stores, more experience, and more value for money. That's why for over 100 years we've always said,
there's magic in a Solomons carpet.
Magic carpet ride for you and me.
Solomons Carpets. Call in or call us and we'll come to you.
Don't you know it's magic?
We're back. Safire, my ear picked up a few senile jabs at Colin Powell in that last conversation. I don't think his role in Haiti will hurt him at all. In fact, I think it enhances his reputation. And I think people consider him a hero of the Persian Gulf War, not in any way falling short.
Well, now, however, we see the Hammurabi division, the Republican Guard, coming in and threatening Kuwait. Who are these guys? These were the guys in the turkey shoot. when they were at our mercy. The people who were keeping Saddam Hussein in power were forgiven, or were the punch was pulled. By whom? At the direct advice of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Colin Powell.
Well, the President of the United States makes that decision.
Yeah, Schwarzkopf was eager to continue.
I think that's a little revisionist on your history, though, Bill, because it was not just Colin Powell. It was the fact that we would lose the support of many of the Arab countries that were in our alliance, that many of our other European allies and the Russians did not want to see Iraq destroyed as a nation.
I think the real thing that we were looking on television, and you could see those guys hanging out there on the ropes, and Colin Powell was certainly part of that decision, a key part. And he decided we shouldn't stop him, destroy him.
It's a sign that once you step off a pedestal, if he does step off a pedestal, there are going to be an awful lot of questions, not only about this, but about everything. I mean, you can be at 90% in the polls or whatever he is, as long as you stay out of the fray. As soon as you step down, there are going to be a lot of questions.
Let's talk. Look, he's a wonderful man, and I like him. But he's not to be universally adored when he's making big mistakes.
Let's talk about the midterm elections. A month away. How do you see it going? Will the Republicans win control of the Senate and or House?
Gee, remember a year ago I was saying it's possible that 7 more in 94, and now I'm beginning to worry that we're getting a little smug and complacent. But if you look at it, you saw the president in his press conference, with everything happening in Iraq, stick to his script and say the Republican contract is wrong, and start his campaign against this one little example of what the Republicans are for. Now, you can't hit the Republicans for being for something, and at the same time hitting them for being absolute obstructionists.
But would Richard Nixon be in favor of increasing defense, cutting taxes, and still claiming to balance the budget?
No. But fortunately for the Republicans, Nixon is not running this year. And I think what you're going to see is Leon Panetta saying, $1 trillion it costs, and they're not saying it. And the Republicans saying, look, it's only $150 billion, and we're showing you how you can do it. But more important, as we saw on this program, it's, do you want to run against Ronald Reagan? And there you saw the Clinton people sort of back away and say, let's not talk personalities.
Bill Safire, Ron Brownstein, David Broder, we have to call it a day. Tomorrow on Today, a look at the sex survey of America. And tomorrow night on the NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, an investigative report. If we destroyed Saddam Hussein's army in '91, why is he able to launch another invasion? That's all for today. We'll be back next week. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.